And welcome to the Daily Space Weather. Congratulations on realizing that this channel exists. First thing we're looking at is Earth's magnetic moment from space. What's modeled in this imagery here is magnetohydrodynamic pressure. And we see a bit of a lull in the pressure here. We may have seen a coronal mass ejection strike. We are expecting another coronal mass ejection strike to strike later in the day tomorrow on the 6th and early in the day on the 7th of April. But this is the current environment over the last 4 hours. Earth's magnetic moment from space. So we're starting out looking at earthly magnetism. And the space weather modeling framework is derived from lots of different variables. If you want to read about it, click on the Details tab, which is right down here on the Geospace Magnetosphere Movies page. We let that play through there as it refreshed just before reaching the end of the 4-hour run. Let's look at Earth's magnetic moment from the ground. This is modeled in nanotesla magnetic flux density. Like Earth's magnetic moment from space, it's 4 hours of data. It's all courtesy of University of Michigan. And things are moderately calm here at the moment. From the perspective of planet Earth, we can expect an uptick coming late in the day tomorrow, according to NOAA, and early in the day on the 7th. So there's the KP index. We came out of a brief period of geomagnetic unrest yesterday morning, and indeed on April 3rd. Current conditions are a KP2. It's geomagnetic calm conditions on the planetary K index. Next, the real-time solar wind. And I think we saw a small coronal mass ejection strike here. Pretty minor, as we saw an uptick in both the solar wind density and speed right at the same time. Quite short-lived. There was also a shift in the phi angle and the BTBZ. So anyway, since then we've seen a reduction in the density and the solar wind speed. So current conditions are showing up as only 3.75 protons per cubic centimeter for solar wind density, solar wind speed 403 kilometers per second. Keep in mind, folks, that's measured at Lagrange point 1, the gravitational equilibrium point in between the Earth and the Sun, by the ACE and Discover spacecraft. No new spikes in the proton flux. We're seeing that subsiding following some relativistic particles associated with a large solar flare. Since then, pretty chill. Here are your GOES magnetometers over the past 3 days. Looking fairly smooth here. A little bit of indecision as far as the polarity of the heliospheric current sheet. Let's get to that. Now that we've shown you the GOES magnetometers, the readings from the GOES 16 and 17. For you new viewers, by the way, these N's and M's, they stand for noon and midnight local time for the satellites. Here's your heliospheric current sheet imagery. And this Gong 2 data is some of the most important data that we have as far as things like forecasting. It tells us huge insight into the magnetic environment surrounding the Sun. The plasma coming out of the Sun is oriented to one pole or the other. South pole oriented current sheet shows here in red. North pole shows here in green. And Earth is in an indecisive moment. Looks like it's remaining in a South pole current sheet at the moment. North pole current sheet just teased us there. And here's the line of sight view, also showing the solar magnetogram. Looks like Earth will remain in a South pole current sheet. And we are expecting some activity to rise there in the north based on this observation. Next, looking at coronal holes and the Sun's B field showing up in blue. And we see some more South pole oriented coronal holes rotating in here. This one over here setting in the west has actually grown in the past couple of days. A little bit less defined coronal holes in the east. Let's take a look at them through the 193 angstroms SDO wavelength. I would also note a huge plasma filament down here. If we're likely to see large solar flares, we'll get to that in a moment. They're likely to come from this area. And if we see a large coronal mass ejection, don't be surprised to see this filament eject. In any case, that's 193 angstroms. These coronal holes over here are South Pole-oriented coronal hole systems. We expect to see those get a little bit more well-defined here. Keep in mind, folks, the solar corona is very bumpy and can obscure features if they're not directly facing Earth. Next, moving on to sunspots. We've seen a bit of a reduction here in sunspots. There is one newly named region here. It's sunspot 2985. I believe we forecasted that yesterday because it was already visible. Otherwise, solar activity has dropped a bit since yesterday. Radio flux is now at 128 solar flux units. We also see the setting of sunspot 2975 and the associated regions like sunspot 2976. I think there may be a sunspot behind this active region up here. Likelihood of large flares is still quite high. To reiterate, most likely place to see large flares is from sunspot 2978 and the associated areas. And let's move on to view sunspots through 1700 angstroms, part of the ultraviolet spectrum. It's not associated with a specific chemical spectra. It's just a great wavelength in extreme UV to show the definition of sunspots and active regions. Wait, there's more. First, press like and subscribe. If you enjoy the content, tell your friends and foes about us. Press share. We're also on BitChute. We've been putting up exclusives there. Check out the views on BitChute, 1394, 1318, 2070. On BitChute, where we only have 683 subscribers. And we're barely getting 100 views on YouTube. Thanks to our Twitch followers. We already streamed one video live today to Twitch. Twitch.tv/SmashOmash is the main source for live streams at the Smash News Network, least busted name of news, although we do YouTube live streams somewhat regularly on the channel. So welcome to the Neo Renaissance. Please visit our links. Consider picking up some merch. If you're sick of not getting notifications on certain websites, head to smashomash.com and click Smash Team, and you will find all of our posts right there. So all of our videos that are publicly visible will all show up there. These are actually yesterday's videos. We haven't refreshed this, but that is what it looked like yesterday after we were done creating content. So just head to smashomash.com or smashomash.com/smashteam, and you'll find that without all in one location, folks. You won't have to visit all kinds of websites and rely on notifications from companies who mislead their investors. Next, looking at the GOES X-ray flux here. No major flares over the past 24. There was a C-class intensification here. Peak flux there was around 2110 yesterday evening. That's universal time. Once again, the most likely place to see a CME would be from this filament. It's quite huge. It seems to stretch all the way around the limb and all the way up to here. There's like an S-shaped bend in it. The most likely place to see a large flare would be from this sunspot group right here. Next, the solar system forecast. Here's where things are now. We'll advance this 1 week. As we approach another full moon, we'll have a gibbous waxing on the 12th of April as Mercury swings around to lap us again. Next, in-the-sky.org's star chart. The yellow line is the ecliptic. That's the path the sun will take across the sky. The blue line is the galactic plane. And you may see some planets there like Saturn, Mars, Venus, and Jupiter all rising ahead of the sun. If you want to make your own star chart, put in your location at in-the-sky.org. This is the all-sky chart, and there are all kinds of other interesting charts there. We'll close out with some coronal mass ejection imagery, mainly from the SOHO-LASCO C3 located here at Lagrangian Point 1, the same location as the Discover and ACE spacecraft that measure the solar wind. We'll also view Stereo A's coronagraph, which is fairly uneventful. But this one's going back far enough to show multiple coronal mass ejections here. We do not anticipate these to be earthly directed. They seem to be separate events, not a halo ejection. And that's where we'll have to end today's in-depth daily space weather video. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon at the Smash News Network. Least busted name in news. May that solar wind be at your back.